I'd rather have blown off all interviews while I'm studying, but I need feedback as to whether I'm studying the right stuff. You know, what the, what the, you know what I mean? That I'm not wasting my time.
I understand.
It helps me focus my efforts. They say you're supposed to do one practice interview a month in your career. I kind of agree with that, but choking interviews is not... I mean, I don't know how small of a community the, you know, IT recruiter community is. I don't know how much they talk to each other. You know, I don't want... What? Do you know what I mean?
Back.
You can get blackballed to an extent. I got... Several years ago, I got blackballed by a company. I thought the interview went okay. Turns out they just freaking hated me.
Yes, I love you
And were just
too.
talking shit about me to anyone who would listen. Believe it or not, it was GameStop.
Nothing wrong with a little opportunistic
And so I'm very wary of, you know. Now with working remote has greatly increased the job available job pool, and I would like to do, but at the same time, you know, every recruiter kind of does a hard sell, and it's hard to say no. You know, when they're begging, you know, to interview.
What? What? What is it?
Oh, is that the exit? That's
What
the
is it,
exit,
baby?
isn't it?
What is it, baby boy?
Oh, shit.
You want some cuddles? Do you want some cuddles?
I gotta find that stupid wood elf. Are they going to add another slot to the bar? And the changes, updates to the combat system? I mean, the graphics are second to none. The story, the lore is good. It's great, even. I can even tolerate their woke crap, like the gay stuff. They got a couple of gay stories. And I could even put up with that to an extent. The quality of the rest of the game is so good. I think I might even make a post on the Blizzard forums and say, here's my test now for judging whether a game is playable. Certainly it's playable by me. That is that I can play the game without wanting to log out and go to the official forums and complain about something. You know? Because I can't think of a lot to complain about. You know, actually, there is only one thing really about this game that I really can't stand, and that's all of the stuff. There's just too much damn stuff. I realize they added the crafting bank and all, but it's still just not enough. I haven't played a game where I felt like it was so good that it was almost like the developers were getting inside my head, you know? And pushing my buttons. You know what I mean? Anybody know?
Yeah,
You know what I'm talking about?
I do.
I haven't played a game like that in a while. Well, kind of with Burning Crusade Classic, but the damage done to the community with the over-pop and under-pop servers, depending on which faction you are, is just, you know. I mean, you can go to the server I play on, Benediction. It's one of the highest pop servers, if not the highest, and it, you know, I just want to say to everybody standing around at Stormwind, aren't you guys bored? Don't you want to go kill some Horde? You know? You got, you know, admiring their gear and their mounts and everything. Well, don't you want to go waste the enemy or whatever? You know? Defeat Dar. Where is this guy? How do I turn in the quest? I still haven't completed this silly public dungeon. Where's that stupid wood elf? Maybe I did complete it. I don't know. Blackwood. What is it called? We got a rain of frogs. Is that it? Defeat old Deathwart. That's repeatable. That's a daily. Conflict of interest. Gather crow eggs.
That's also daily.
Yeah, Harada Harvest. Talk to Adrahan. Yeah, that's him. Where are you, you little shit? Ugh. Annoying. How do I get out of here? Yeah, that's what I thought. Oh, I don't want to go wandering around this dungeon again. It's a pretty good dungeon. I think they overdid making, you know, a little more complex than it needed to be, but... Here we go. An angry green bat. Hackwing, they're called. We might be headed towards a place you showed me. Was it yesterday or the day before? Where are we going? Where is this stupid wood elf? You know. Fake book. I hate fake book. Why am I streaming on fake book? I hate it. I guess I shouldn't say that out loud. They'll cancel me. They'll ban me. Bunch of commies. Is this dirtbag? Just keep to the right. If I can.
I really don't like your odds.
Nope. This is the problem. Wow. Well, let's see. How much farther?
Off with you, Swit!
Back to the same spot again. I must have missed a turn in. Quest turn in. Root Cavern.
What's that?
There he is, a
Feeling
little
a bit better then?
dirtbag.
Don't mention it. Huh? Oh, she's bad. This? Right. I can mix up something to ease her passing at the least. I'll be out once she's at peace.
He just happened to have a mortar and pestle with him. It could happen. Not a fan of the Bosmer. Please tell me it's over. Okay. Had to go all the way to the absolute end of the dungeon to find the little shit. Oh well.
Oh dear.
Where are the others? The ones who sent you? Was there a Dunmo woman among them?
I tried to save her, but her wounds... I couldn't. I'm sorry.
No. The fiend?
I've had people come to me for that. I did try.
Wilting
save
Weed
these
Killer
folk at least.
File.
Oh,
Good. Shut up. Leave me alone. I don't want to do any more of your quests.
Let's ride!
Okay. It's a pretty busy zone, Blackwood is, don't you think? Got a lot of stuff going on.
Oh yeah, that's nice. It's because it was, you know, one of the more recently released
Right.
contests. That's why it's so busy.
Be right back. Okay. Let's see, what am I? I just got a memento. What is it?
Cool.
It was the one in that dungeon. Wilting Weed Killer File. Okay. Well, my character doesn't seem to like it very much. So what we got? Sold a bunch more stuff. Okay, so Rubidite. Rubidite. These are all BOEs. Okay. Dwarven oil. The newer classes to me feel more complete and playable. You know what I mean?
No, could you explain?
Just smoother rotation. Okay, so with the legacy classes, particularly with the Templar or the DK, you have to use abilities, weapon abilities or guild abilities or whatever. You know, one or two on each toolbar set or skill set. But with the Warden and the Necro, they play just fine without those, in my opinion. Like the Warden's healing spells are much more complete than the Templars. Now the Templar is still a better burst healer and probably a better healer overall, but the Warden, you know, if you use only Warden they're more self-sufficient is another way to put it. The Warden feels more self-sufficient than the Templar. Good or bad, I don't know. Now, all I've done is magic DPS with a Warden, or the Warden. And, do you know, are you still here, Eric? He's not here. Oh, he's not playing a game either. I'd like to play Rome 2 more, but that game, I get obsessed with that game and just can't put it down, and I cannot let that happen while I'm prepping for job interviews because I only have so much time. I got about 3 months. I can last about 3 months if I don't get a job in the next couple of months. I'm in real financial trouble. What's this law they want to pass about the media cartel law? I don't like the idea. Hmm. Whoopi Goldberg threatening to quit The View. I don't think she should be fired for what she said. I think what she said was stupid and ignorant, but I don't think it was necessarily anti-Semitic. I think she had no freaking clue what she was talking about. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. You know what I'm talking about with the Holocaust thing, where it was just white people on white people? Like,
well, when you were saying about ignorant statement made by Whoopi Goldberg on The View, and it's like, okay, which day do you want to pick? Yeah.
yeah, I mean, but let her say stupid stuff, I don't think she was intentionally, racist or whatever. I don't think it was racist. But I don't have room for all these stupid Brits. Crafting. Do you agree, disagree?
I believe that she should, be allowed to say what she wants to. Is that I know that the reverse doesn't, occur to her, but you know, that would be my opinion. I frequently refer to some people as diodes. Do you get the reasoning about that?
Diodes.
Are you familiar with in electronics about how a diode works?
Yeah, yeah. It's a transistor.
What specifically about the diode makes it sort of remarkable?
I'm not sure. Are you asking or telling me?
I'm asking if you know, and if you don't,
I
I'll
used
tell
to.
you.
I used to, but I've forgotten.
Current only flows in one direction.
There you go.
So, people can only be, there's a lot of people that are only one way about things. It's like, rules for me, but not for thee type deal and things like that, But, they can go ahead and criticize people, but they can't stand to be criticized, that type of deal.
Yeah. Current only flows in one direction. Yeah. CNN scalp pool. They've gotten rid of 4 people already. They're gonna fire them all. Why don't they just freaking fire them? Why torment them before they fire them with all this sexual harassment and crap? Just fire them. Just get rid of them. It's like they gotta have some woke justification for doing it. Your ratings suck. Fire them. They suck. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
It's just gone stupid. I'll be right back.
I'm gonna log off the evening.
Hello. Hello. Anybody here? You still here? Hey, how come you don't just get on Discord when you log in? I like talking to myself. As long as I don't, myself doesn't answer.
The dangerous individual known as Michelle Malkin has been banned from Airbnb. An Airbnb trust team email sent last November notified Malkin that due to her keynote speech at the American Renaissance Conference, the bed and breakfast service will be banning the accounts of her and her husband. A community support member added that the ban is consistent with action they've taken to ban people associated with American Renaissance in past years. Michelle's speech encapsulated her 3 decades of work covering the nation's demographic crisis. She condemned critical race theory, the whitewashing of Black on Asian attacks, and censorship of political dissidents on the right. Airbnb has a history of similar actions. In 2017, the company banned users who were attending Unite the Right in Charlottesville, Virginia. Legally speaking, Airbnb's actions could be a gross violation of constitutional rights. The company is based in California and subject to the state's Unruh Civil Rights Act, which protects speech, free association, and equal housing rights. Further, the white nationalist characterization of Michelle Malkin is just another character assassination by far-left and anti-white Southern Poverty Law Center and the Anti-Defamation League. Michelle writes, "I resoundingly reject the notion that condemning Black Lives Matter and Antifa terrorists constitutes hate." Malkin has now launched a legal fund to fight Airbnb and end discriminatory housing policies against conservatives. Read her full column at vdare.com and learn how you can contribute by clicking the link attached to this video.
Fine. What's going on? Wait. Where, Trial network. What's going on? Is there a guild name here? Why me? What's their name?
Welcome to Movie Caps. Today I will show you a drama, fantasy, romance film from 2015, titled The Age of Adeline. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Happy Friday. If you've been following the news at all recently,
Fox Nation. Nation.com. Where's Tucker Carlson tonight? Shit. Tell me I didn't fuck it up. Stupid.
good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Here's something we've noticed. You may have noticed it too. All of a sudden, pretty much every powerful person in the country is talking about something called democracy. Democracy! Our sacred democracy! You hear that word everywhere, from The Atlantic to NPR to the New Yorker magazine and NBC News in between. Democracy defines the year 2022 the way that Groovy defined 1968. All the cool kids are saying it. Liz Cheney has decided her life's mission is now to defend democracy. Jim Acosta has a new CNN show in which he uses the word democracy the way some people use prepositions, in every sentence. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern, there's a Zoom webinar on democracy, which you're welcome to attend in case you haven't heard enough about it already. Every left-of-center midwit on Twitter will be there. All of them will be fretting about the future of democracy. Pretty amusing. It's easy to make fun of an event like that, and of course you have a moral obligation to. David Frum bloviates about democracy, insert joke here. But actually, if we're being honest about it, you should be a little worried about the state of our democracy. How is our democracy doing? Well, let's see. Another way to describe democracy is popular representation. It's a synonym.
Thank you.
When the government does what citizens want it to, you have a democracy. And when it doesn't, you don't. You no longer have a free country that is ruled by its people. So what kind of system do we have? It's easy to know. You find out what citizens care about, and then you compare those concerns to what the people who run the government say they care about. If you've got a functioning democracy, there should be a fairly precise overlap. In a democratic system, leaders try very hard to speak for their voters. That's the whole point of the government. So let's apply that test to the United States of America. What do our leaders care about? We know the answer because they tell us constantly. Our leaders care about equity and climate change. They care about trans rights, police brutality, the deadly insurrection of January 6th, mandatory vaccinations, more H-1B visas for Indian tech workers, and above all, at the moment, defending our closest ally, Ukraine, from Russian aggression. And of course, they care about third-wave academic feminism. That's deeply important to them. Watch as the most famous Democrat in Congress gives us an impromptu tutorial on Instagram about the connection between cosmetics and the patriarchy.
There are studies that show that women who wear makeup or regularly wear like a decent amount of makeup, kind of show up to the office in glam, also make more money. And so at that point, it stops being, these calculations and decisions stop being about choice, and they start being about patriarchy. We live in systems that were largely built for the convenience of men, and oftentimes were designed with the subjugation of women
you're
and
so
queer
subjugated.
people in mind.
Give that lady an MSNBC show. Sorry, Mika. I wear makeup because I'm oppressed. Me, 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 me. Now, the shorthand description of that is narcissism, which in the end is the defining concern of our leaders. Above all, they're interested in themselves. If you work in the media or have multiple college degrees, chances are you're pretty good at making it all about you. You is what you care about most. What does the rest of America care about? Well, once again, we don't have to guess about that. We've got a huge amount of public opinion polling on that subject, and you're seeing the results right now from a recent Gallup survey on your screen. At the top of that list, you'll see government incompetence, the economy, the cost of living, and immigration. That's weird. This looks completely different from the list that Joe Biden might have made. Equity, climate change, transgenderism, mandatory vaxes, January 6th, Ukraine. Those turn out to be pretty unimportant to most Americans. In fact, some of those issues are at the very bottom of the list. But how can that be? If global climate change is the most imminent existential crisis of our time, then why don't voters seem concerned about it? We don't know, but they're definitely not concerned about it. Instead, Americans are very worried about inflation and crime. As it happens, and this tells you everything, those are the two topics the White House has dismissed recently as irrelevant and dumb. The White House isn't at all worried about inflation and crime. That doesn't sound like democracy. Here's the White House press secretary taking some time off from her junior year at Oberlin to speak to her fellow undergrads at something called Pod Save America about how rising crime rates are actually an invention of those racists at Fox News.
Right now, just to give you a sense, so CNN, Pentagon, as many as 8,500 U.S. troops on heightened alert. Okay, true. Same on MSNBC. CNBC is doing their own thing about the market. And then on Fox is Jeanine Pirro talking about soft on crime consequences. I mean, what does that even mean, right? So there's an alternate universe on some coverage. What's scary about it is a lot of people watch that and they think that the president isn't doing anything to address people's safety.
So what do your kids getting shot have to do with Ukraine? Nothing, Dumbo. You're living in an alternate universe. That's Jen Psaki's position. You'd have to be delusional to think crime was a problem in this country. Unless you happened to be in Georgetown last night around 6:45 p.m. If you were there, you may have seen a man shot to death outside Georgetown Cupcakes. That's just off M Street. And the funny thing is, that's not too far from where Jen Psaki lives. But did Jen Psaki acknowledge that happened? Of course she didn't. Noticing the
Fate speaks in riddles. Your fate was written in the scrolls long ago. It is entwined with the fate of the 5 companions. I have finally located. She works a terrible forge under the lash of the great deceiver, Molog Baal. Her soul is in great danger. You must go to her. I can manifest a gate to that dark realm, but you must go quickly. Tread carefully in Molog Baal's realm. You are important. The scrolls have so named you. After Lyris took my place in the Wailing Prison so that we might escape, the Daedra moved her to the Foundry of Woe. It is a place of torment and despair. She toils endlessly making weapons for the enemy. The god of schemes invaded my mind many times during my imprisonment. It was a tortuous experience, but by forcing his way into my mind, he inadvertently opened his own thoughts to me, and thus created a chink in his own armor. We are connected, he and I. With concentration, I can see through his eyes. He feels my presence, and it fills him with rage. When you enter the Foundry to recover Lyris, I can keep his attention focused on me. He will be blind to you for a time. It will be a far greater danger for you to enter Cold Harbor without this distraction. It is Molog Baal's realm, and his power there is great. I will endeavor to distract him in this manner whenever you travel there.
collapse of your civilization is racist even when it's happening just down the street. Look away, Jen Psaki, look away! And whatever you do, don't go to Baltimore. Baltimore is a major American city. It's only about 40 miles from where Jen Psaki lives. It's one of the worst places in the Western Hemisphere. It's a little bit of Haiti in the mid-Atlantic. Baltimore is exactly what happens when you apply Jen Psaki's ideas to governance. Baltimore is a city run by people who fervently believe in the equity agenda and consider gender studies a legitimate academic discipline. In Baltimore, pretty much everyone in charge is black, yet it's a matter of religious faith that the main thing holding the city back is white racism. In other words, everybody with power in Baltimore agrees with Jen Psaki. So it's an entirely fair question to ask, hey, Jen Psaki, what do you think of Baltimore? How did the city get that way? You claim to care so deeply about African Americans, you never stop talking about that. And yet here is one of the biggest black majority cities in the United States. Tens of thousands of black people who live in Baltimore are in misery because their kids keep getting murdered. Last year, Baltimore's murder rate was higher than it is in El Salvador and Honduras. Now, those are countries the State Department tells us to, quote, avoid due to crime.
You're alive.
So it's fair to say things are incredibly violent in Baltimore. They have been for a long time. And yet, under Joe Biden, somehow, they've gotten even worse in Baltimore. Here's a local news report from today.
The hugging and crying. Sounds of sorrow, outpouring of emotions over the killing of a loved one. 36 homicides in the first month this year in Baltimore City, with only 2 arrests, one for a deadly shooting, the other a stabbing death.
36 murders in 31 days. That's the deadliest January in Baltimore in nearly 50 years. And remember, 50 years ago, Baltimore was almost twice as big as it is now. Half the city's left. So Baltimore is far worse off than it has ever been in its history. And it's not just murders. Drug crimes are up dramatically. You might not know that because they're not being prosecuted anymore. Last spring, the local city attorney, a George Soros puppet called Marilyn Mosby, announced she would no longer prosecute low-level drug crime. So arrests plummeted. But drug trafficking exploded. Here's what it looks like.
Guard cameras caught what appears to be one of those open-air drug deals happening in broad daylight near the Edmondson Village Shopping Center. It's an issue we've been hearing about in neighborhoods citywide throughout the summer. It comes after City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby stopped prosecuting certain drug crimes in the city, including drug possession. A major policy shift that some believe have left the issue to only flourish.
Jen Psaki's for that. Black people don't want laws to be enforced. That's her view. That's the view of everyone she knows. But what did policies like that do to Baltimore? Well, they turned a once beautiful city into a slum. According to a report by Fox 45 in Baltimore, public school administrators have instructed the police to stop arresting students for committing crimes. And that would include serious offenses from burglary to assault. So the cops did stop arresting kids. The number of students arrested in Baltimore schools has dropped by 98% in the last decade. That looks good on paper, but it turns out ignoring crime is not the same as stopping crime. Schools in Baltimore got so bad that kids stopped learning anything. Watch this report and ask yourself, what is Baltimore going to look like in 20 years?
In reading, 628 Patterson High School students took the test. 484 of them, or 77%, tested at an elementary school reading level. That includes 71 high school students who are reading at a kindergarten level and 88 students reading at a first grade level. Another 45 are reading at a second grade level. Just 12 students tested at Patterson High School were reading at grade level. That comes out to less than 2%.
My mother died giving me life.
So the kids can't read. They're illiterate. What does their future look like? What does Baltimore's future look like? What does the country's future look like? How are they going to participate in our society? You wouldn't know any of this was happening by looking at the official graduation numbers, because last year Baltimore announced that students will graduate from high school even if they fail their courses. Baltimore's so-called chief academic officer, that would be a Harvard-educated bureaucrat called Joan Dabrowski, announced that this policy was designed to, quote, avoid the punitive approach of failing students. Okay, but somebody is failing students in Baltimore. Somebody, in fact, is failing the entire city. And you have to ask yourself, who would that be? You'd like to ask Jen Psaki, who do you blame for Baltimore? Did white men do this to Baltimore? Was it the patriarchy? Was it structural racism that caused all those murders? Do you agree with Pete Buttigieg that Klansmen urban planners put the highways in the wrong place? And that's the real problem, racist roads. Or could it be that the real problem with Baltimore is something much more obvious? Could it be that progressive policies designed to, quote, lift up marginalized communities, in the end, destroyed those communities? What's the answer, Jen Psaki? In a functioning democracy, people like Jen Psaki would have to tell us the answer. They would be required to live in Baltimore until they learned something, just as the people who wrecked Afghanistan probably ought to explain what they've learned before they move on to Ukraine and Russia. That ought to be a requirement. And in fact, honestly, you'd think that people like this would welcome a chance to reflect on what they've done. They have screwed up very badly. They've hurt the weakest among us. For Christians, that's the greatest sin. But these people aren't Christians. They worship only themselves, so they turn away. You can bet money that Jen Psaki rarely goes to Baltimore. It's just too depressing, and it raises too many questions. Instead, Jen Psaki and her friends are planning their fun little summer trips to Bozeman, or Martha's Vineyard, or East Hampton, or some other remote and blindingly white outpost of privilege. Funny how that works. You wreck stuff, and then you ignore it. This allows you to wreck more stuff without feeling guilty. That's modern progressivism distilled to 18 words.
Excellent.
Candace Owens is the host of Candace. We're always honored to have her on this show. Candace Owens, thanks so much for coming. And so Baltimore's right next to D.C. No one in D.C. ever goes there. I can tell you that firsthand. And you have to wonder, like, you wake up with these new policies, you're going to, make the country better. You don't notice what's 40 miles away?
What's your step? All the mining has made these tunnels.
Oh, they definitely notice, and I want to say this. Jen Psaki is not delusional. She is intentional. She's every bit intentional, and she knows exactly what she's saying. The Democrat Party came in to do exactly what you see them doing. People like to think that they're stupid. No, they're lying and they're Machiavellian. This is a part of their plan. And when you look at these inner cities and you talk about these rates of children that are illiterate, you have to understand that illiteracy is so crucial to any individual that wants to put in place what I view as a modernized slave system. I talk about this all the time. Black America, I've been preaching to for the last 4 years, trying to get them to wake up to this. Democrats, if you look back at their old handbook, they've got it open again. What they want is power. They want power over people. If you want power over people, people cannot be educated, right? The greatest freedom given to Black Americans when slavery was ended was the right to go and get educated. The slave codes literally did not allow people to become educated. What they are doing in terms of lockdowns, people are like, oh, it's fighting a virus. No, what you are seeing is a deletion of the middle class. The Democrats are after power. They're after an oligarchy. They want to be at the top and they want to rule over people, and they want people that they're ruling over instead to be focused on ridiculous causes. Because when you're uneducated, by the way, I have a toddler, I have a 1-year-old, he runs around and he cries and he screams and he stomps his feet about things that don't mean anything in the scheme of things because he's ignorant and because he's young. But what if you turn functioning adults into ignorant 1-year-olds? What you have are people that are going to go outside and scream about trans issues, not realizing that they're upon a plantation that has taken virtually everything that they have from them, and that is that the Democrats are recreating the very same plantations they had in this country centuries ago.
Isn't that the opposite of democracy? In a democratic system, you encourage independent-minded, well-educated, informed citizens. Otherwise, you can't have a democracy, right?
And that's the point. If these were well-educated citizens, they would be looking into these policies. They would say, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense. What do you mean you're going to keep giving us money and that's going to be enough? What do you mean? How is welfare going to work if you're de-incentivizing people to marry their loved ones, to marry the father of their children? Why are these policies incentivizing families to break down, right? An educated person would look at these policies and understand that everything that they're trying to do is to garner more power for themselves, to create more departments within the government, to grow the government, to the size that we see it today. Or another department to take care of you, to be your mother, to be your father. It is just so unfortunate that people did not understand this before we got into this predicament, but I am hopeful through the disasters of this administration that after this, they will begin to wake up and we will see opposite when people begin electing leaders that actually want to create a functioning democracy.
Man, I hope you're right. And really, we all need to pause and just ask, like, how did Baltimore happen before we spend another dollar making people more miserable and hurting them, which is clearly what these policies have done. Candace Owens, I appreciate your coming on tonight. Thank you, as always.
Thank you.
So there are more people living on the streets than ever before since the Great Depression. But we're not in a Great Depression, so why has this happened? Well, Joe Biden is finally on the case, and he has named an aspiring musician to solve the crisis. Plus, Biden's pick for the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, wants to censor this channel. Ooh, perfect. We're not going to let that happen. We do want to tell you about her in some detail. We'll be back. More people living on American streets at any time in 100 years is getting very noticeable. It's obviously a sign of decay. It's scary, actually. So Joe Biden has finally named someone to be his new homelessness czar. Turns out the problem is we're all too transphobic. That's why we have the homeless. So Biden has appointed an aspiring musician called Jeff Olivet. Jason Rantz has been looking into Mr. Olivet. Jason Rantz is the host of the Jason Rantz Show on KTTH, and we're always happy to have him join us. Jason, thanks for coming on. Who is this guy?
He is someone who is deeply unimpressive and a long-established member of the homeless industrial complex. He most recently became an anti-racist consultant who tells white people to curb their white privilege, which is ironic because he probably used that to land this new job. So Olivet basically views homelessness through a critical race theory and social justice lens, which basically means he blames homelessness on racism because the homeless population is disproportionately black. So what he's basically saying is, look, if you're black, if you have a mental illness or an addiction and you're homeless, he says it's because of institutional racism in the healthcare system that didn't give you affordable healthcare treatment to begin with that led you to become homeless.
Are you freaking serious? Are you serious?
That is...
Is there any end to these people? Will they just stop breaking things? Are you fairly characterizing this guy's views? Because it's like, how much more of this can we take?
Yeah, no, I was in the same way. I've been looking over and over a lot of his interviews, and it's pretty clear where he stands. He's basically saying, look, if you're going to end racism, you have to get at the root causes, and then that turns into ending homelessness. And he actually explains what needs to happen, he says, in this interview here with a nonprofit called Family Promise.
If we don't pull it out by the root, if we don't address the deep structural underlying racism that is driving high rates of homelessness for people of color and families of color, then there's no way we'll ever end it.
So that doesn't actually explain why white people are homeless or Asians or Latinos, but it's not a priority for this White House. So moving forward, this is what we can expect. He's going to pour billions of dollars into a housing first strategy, which kind of functions the way it sounds. So the homeless get housed first, meaning there's no conditions on the housing, like getting addiction treatment so you're not shooting up in the subsidized home. And usually proponents will look to Salt Lake City because they use this model, and it's been really effective in getting like 95% of the homeless people that they get into contact with into housing. However, the studies show they don't actually become self-sufficient. So that's in part because of the underlying conditions that are never treated successfully. So using this approach naturally basically means you're going to be spending billions of dollars on housing and case management where the homeless never actually leave. And so your question, which I think is a legitimate one, is how did someone like this get to this position? And maybe it has nothing to do with homelessness. Maybe it's the other skills. Maybe he can entertain the White House interns.
Well, but you know exactly what's going on. It's the same gig all the time. You blame Whitey, and then you take money from developers. So this is a payoff to developers, of course. Private equity is buying up all the single-family homes, so we're going to build a lot more multifamily housing. Developers are going to get rich, all under the cover of wokeness.
What's happened to you? What have they done?
Lyris, I can see you. Are you really there?
Sai, it's me. We're seeing some kind of vision of you. Do you know where you are?
I don't know. The torch.
Like, we're on to the game now. I mean, it's just totally
it's clear as day, and we know exactly how much money they're going to be putting into it. It is absolutely ludicrous, and people better step up, because otherwise all we're doing is creating a situation where they never actually get out of the homelessness.
Right. It doesn't help anybody except the developers, of course. Jason Rantz, great to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.
Well, here's a wild story. Joe Biden has nominated someone called Gigi Sohn to fill a vacancy on the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. She is a left-wing activist who wants to weaken copyright and speech protections. She's also gone after Fox News and called for censorship of this network. Now, the amazing thing here is that Chris Ruddy, who claims to be conservative and runs Newsmax, the guy gave $1 million to the Clinton Foundation, is supporting her nomination. Now, if this person actually gets the seat, it would give Democrats a majority among FCC commissioners. Again, this is a party that's committed to squelching free speech. So it's a meaningful story. Charles Gasparino has been covering this in great detail. He's a senior correspondent of Fox Business. We're honored to have him tonight. Mr. Gasparino, can you summarize who this person is, please?
Gigi Sohn is, listen, she's a brilliant lawyer. She's a brilliant progressive activist, but she's to the left of Rachel Maddow. She's probably as liberal as Bernie Sanders when it comes to government controlling the internet and big business. She hates Fox. And, you know, she's left such a massive paper trail of conflicts of interest, of saying things, that there's really a question whether she can be in a job as FCC commissioner. Now, listen, everybody has an opinion, right? We have an opinion,
Right.
all the
For
FCC
sure.
commissioners, but they also have to abide by the administrative code. They have to follow the law. And she's been so out there on the spectrum in some of her things she said about Fox and other, Sinclair, you name it, all down the line, that there's a real question. And now Roger Wicker, the senator from Mississippi, has persuaded the Senate the Commerce Committee to postpone her hearing. Her vote was supposed to be yesterday. They're actually going to have a new hearing, a second hearing for her next week. And we're going to hear everything, including this whole sordid tale of her involvement in a nonprofit called Lowcast, which was essentially set up. What it did was it siphoned, some people would say stole, broadcast signals from major broadcast companies, us included, NBC, put it into essentially the internet, and allowed people, and this was their basic goals, and they were a nonprofit, allowed people to see that programming at a high quality if you can't afford cable. It sounded like a noble idea. The broadcast company sued. The judge sided with the broadcast company, saying Lowcast, and Miss Sohn, she's on the board of Lowcast, you owe $30 million. And then, lo and behold, some documents came out last week. I wrote about in the New York Post, I wrote about in Fox Business, where it showed that Lowcast only paid $700,000. And that deal was struck with the big broadcasters. Again, Fox was part of that. A day after she was named FCC chief. So the FCC nominee for Biden. So think about the conflict of that. She's negotiating with people who know she's going to be their regulator, and this sweetheart deal appears. So now this is out there, and my guest, Tucker, that sweetheart deal and her role in it, she says it's de minimis. Just so you know, I did a whole story, got both sides of the story. You can look at it on foxbusiness.com and also the New York Post. She says it's a de minimis role. She was just a board member. It's not a big deal. But let me tell you something. It doesn't look good that she's sitting there on this company that gets the sweetheart deal with the people or the entity she's going to regulate. And that's going to come up in this hearing next week.
Of course not. The whole thing is criminal. If I shoplift from CVS and sell it at a discount, it's not virtuous.
Yes.
It's theft. Duh. Charlie Casparino, thank you for your reporting. I appreciate it.
Anytime, pal.
So you kind of knew that Pete Buttigieg wasn't going to improve your life. So here's his version of infrastructure. Put robot cops across the country to bust you for speeding, turning us into even more of a surveillance state and enriching people like Pete Buttigieg. We've got details just ahead. Pretty funny that of all the people Joe Biden could have picked to be transportation secretary, he chose a guy who wasn't able to fix the potholes in South Bend, Indiana. That's literally true. He picked Pete Buttigieg. He was a first of some kind because he breastfeeds. But Buttigieg is not deterred by his total demonstrated inability to deal with infrastructure. He has a new plan. He has just announced that he's going to ensure that no one in this country ever again dies in a traffic accident. Watch.
Another thing that it's going to take in order to change the trajectory of roadway safety in this country is a single, ambitious, shared goal. And today we commit that our goal is this: zero. Our goal is 0 deaths. A country where one day nobody has to say goodbye to a loved one because of a traffic crash.
But why stop there? Why not just eliminate death itself? I mean, it's sad when people die. If you worked at McKinsey, you'd think the guy could figure out how to end human suffering and death. There's no reason life should end. And if you're God, and clearly Pete Buttigieg is or considers himself to be, why not do that? I'm sure that goal is coming. But in the meantime, Pete Buttigieg has a very specific plan to eliminate all traffic deaths, and that's putting a lot more robot cops on the streets. Speed cameras. The good thing about speed cameras, he explained, is that they're not racist, because they're just robots. They can't be racist, so that's equity. Now, this has been tried in New York City. New York City went all in on speed cameras a few years ago. Joe Borelli is from New York. He saw it. He's now a member of the city council, and he joins us now to tell us how that experiment went. Joe, thanks so much for coming on. So you guys went to robot cops in New York. What'd you think?
Well, I mean, we should look back to the conclusions of this program. I mean, when Mayor de Blasio started, he started with 20 cameras. By the end of his reign of terror, there were about 1,400. in 750 school zones. And if you ask the Times or Politico or even the statistics themselves, they reveal that New York City streets are deadlier than ever. Now, on the other hand, if you look at the program in terms of being a revenue generator or an indirect tax on cars, then the program was actually wildly successful. $215 million a year generated by our cameras right now. That's $25,000 an hour. And that's actually more than the entire revenue generated by the city of South Bend when Mayor Pete was in charge over there.
So why doesn't some civic-minded billionaire set up an NGO to supply every New Yorker with, say, a dozen cans of spray paint every year so we can go full Boston Tea Party and end this tyranny?
Are you all right?
Yes.
Well, I think you certainly are seeing some signs pop up warning drivers, but even some counties here in New York are actually fighting back. Nassau County, one of our biggest counties, one of the biggest counties in the country, their legislature was bipartisan, unanimous in pushing back and saying we don't want these cameras. Unfortunately, for those of us who live in the city, we're governed by a radical far-left anti-car city council, and we're governed by our state legislature who thinks this is just the cat's meow.
And also anti-human. I mean, who drives in New York? Commuters, cab drivers, delivery men, the same people, by the way, who smoke the $20 a pack cigarettes that you guys sell in New York City. I mean, this is another tax on poor people.
It's certainly a tax on middle class and poor people. You know, we have $20 tolls on our bridges. We're soon going to pay an undetermined amount yet for the privilege of driving from one part of Manhattan to a fancier part of Manhattan. So ultimately, yeah, it's a war on the middle class, but it's also a war on drivers that I think you're seeing elsewhere in the country. I mean, this is sort of the stated goal of most Democrats in power at this point.
Yeah, again. That'll be the last picture they see of you. I hope that happens. Not encouraging law breaking, just freedom. Councilman Borelli, it's great to see you tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So the city of San Francisco couldn't get more perverse, you would think, but now the city is running an illicit drug operation in the Tenderloin. People are allowed to use potentially lethal narcotics inside the facility. Residents are also openly dealing drugs just outside the door. Here's a local news report on it.
San Francisco continues to struggle with homelessness and open-air drug use. Now the city has launched a new linkage center at UN Plaza aimed at meeting immediate and long-term needs. The project got up and running in about 2 weeks as part of the city's Tenderloin Emergency Initiative. The linkage center offers short-term services like food, beverages, and showers with the hope that by forging a bond with those who need those services, it will then have them take advantage of longer-term opportunities to get health treatment and permanent housing.
We love you so much, we're going to help you shoot heroin. Michael Schellenberger's thought a lot about this. He's the author of San Francisco, How Progressives Ruin Cities. He broke this story. He joins us now. Mr. Schellenberger, thanks so much for coming on and for your amazing reporting on this sad subject. So how can you say you care about people if you help them shoot heroin?
Well, you can't, Tucker. I mean, nobody thinks that this is the right way to go, at least in the world of addiction specialists and drug policy experts from around the world. I had a very senior government insider come to me to complain that this is part of a strategy to spread supervised drug consumption sites across California and the rest of the United States in the name of helping people. They're corrupting rehabilitation. This is called a linkage center that's aimed at linking homeless drug addicts to rehab clinics, but it's now been completely perverted. They've opened a center where literally city contractors are overseeing young people smoking meth and fentanyl. We've had a team of 3 reporters reporting from the inside, shooting videos and cameras proving that on public property, a major public plaza in downtown San Francisco, that the government is overseeing open drug use and drug dealing, we've documented. It's really quite disappointing. You may know that I actually defended Mayor Breed of San Francisco for promising a crackdown back in December. The whole thing is now in shambles. It's an embarrassment to San Francisco.
Yeah, she's an embarrassment. I had high hopes too. I mean, I guess this is always the question you ask about government policies. Would you treat your kids this way? If you found you had a kid with a drug problem, you said, you shoot up in your room, smoke meth in your room, at least you're safe. It's supervised. Would you do that?
Absolutely not. They're normalizing drug use. And by the way, they're justifying this by pointing to what they do in Europe, but I interviewed the top drug policy experts in Portugal and Netherlands. In Portugal, the head of the drug policy program said, we do not normalize. If people are caught using heroin and other hard drugs in public, all drugs in public, they are arrested and brought to the police station. In Amsterdam, they do not allow people to shoot heroin or smoke fentanyl in public or smoke meth. That's what's occurring in San Francisco. It's really an abomination, Tucker. I'm sort of still shocked by it. They're attempting to normalize this. They're attempting to make it seem okay for people to just freely smoke some of the most dangerous drugs, the drugs that are killing 2 people in San Francisco per day.
If you've ever been around it, addiction, it's the saddest thing, and this is the way you treat people you hate. It really is. This is the way you treat people you want to hurt. There's no doubt about it. Michael Schellenberger, again, thank you for your reporting on this because it matters.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
So all of a sudden, people don't trust doctors in this country, which is sad because we've long had the best medical care in the world and the most impressive doctors for that matter. But all of a sudden, you're meeting people who say, I'm not really into doctors. I'm going to figure it out on my own. Now, why is that? Why do people no longer trust doctors? Well, we don't put all the blame on one guy. Put some of it. Dr. Peter Hotez, a frequent MSNBC guest, out there spreading misinformation and full-blown lunacy. Does anyone to make you not want to go to the doctor? Again, it's Dr. Peter Hotez. We'll explain after the break. You might have noticed that a lot of people in your world don't trust doctors these days. That's not a good sign. Probably half people you know are exploring alternative medical cures right now. Why is that happening? Well, there are a lot of reasons, but Dr. Peter Hotez is definitely one of those reasons. Hotez is a pediatrician who spent his life studying tropical parasites. He wouldn't seem to be the obvious go-to guest for cable news bookers looking for someone to speak knowledgeably about COVID. But Hotez is a crazed publicity addict. He will do any public appearance anywhere at any time. He never stops. Unfortunately for all of us, when Peter Hotez speaks, he discredits American medicine. He is a misinformation machine, constantly spewing insanity. Coolly compare Hotez's views on COVID to, say, Alex Jones's views on COVID and ask yourself, who's saner? It's not even close. Very few things Peter Hotez says has any relationship to reality. Here he is explaining back in July that there is no conceivable way that Joe Biden will ever announce a vax mandate.
This is months and months of anti-science, anti-vaccine aggression coming from the far-right elements of the Republican Party. And you saw it play out at the CPAC conference where they said this is nothing more than an effort for power and control, and they're going to use, first they're going to force vaccines on us, then they're going to take away our Bibles and our guns, and all of that disinformation, meaning deliberate misinformation, came out of CPAC, the conservative news outlets.
This guy is apparently a prominent figure at a big Texas hospital, Baylor Hospital. Why in the world would they let him do an MSNBC hit like that? If anybody is discrediting vaccines, making people afraid of them, he's such an obvious lunatic, and politicizing medicine, it's Peter Hotez. And by the way, he's totally ignorant. A couple of months after he said that, Joe Biden announced, in fact, vaccines would be mandatory. Now, to be clear, it's not just Peter Hotez's predictions that are wrong. He's also a charlatan. Here he is warning that schools have no reason to lift their mask mandates. Now, this came weeks after the CDC, following Fauci's lead, admitted that cloth masks don't actually work. Why?
If you start lifting mask mandates now, you're basically condemning all the kids to get infected with Omicron and having to live with those consequences, which would mean that some kids will have to be hospitalized or possibly worse. So it makes no sense to lift mask mandates at this point.
Yeah, so we were right. It's Baylor. If you look at his shirt, it says Baylor right on there. Now, why are the morons at Baylor letting their employee go on TV and say stuff like that? What a quick way to discredit your hospital, and again, all of American medicine. Peter Hotez is arguing on TV that anyone who disagrees with him, even when he lies, which is often, anyone who believes in the primacy of scientific data over the opinions of some nutcase from Baylor, is spreading misinformation. And not only that, he believes that's a crime. He wants the federal government to deal with those people. Watch this.
And I've been saying, for the last year and a half, that the Biden administration has to realize that anti-science is a killer. Disinformation. It's not even just disinformation. This is an anti-science empire right now, and we need Homeland Security. We need the Justice Department. We've really got to figure this out, and the Health and Human Services will not be able to figure this out on their own.
Hey, memo to Baylor. A lot of people give you money because they think you're a legitimate organization. This guy is discrediting you and our medical system. He's arguing in his little Baylor scrubs that people who don't agree with him belong in jail. The Justice Department needs to go after people who disagree with Peter Hotez. Sorry, Peter Hotez, we have freedom of speech in this country. And no one should be more grateful for that than you. So here's an interesting story. The New York Times has just sued the State Department. They're seeking access to U.S. Embassy emails that mention Hunter Biden. Now, lawyers for the newspaper say the State Department is withholding those emails unlawfully, which has been a Freedom of Information Act request that's been ignored. Glenn Greenwald has been following the story, which is really interesting. He's, of course, a journalist, one of the most famous. He's on Substack now. He joins us tonight. Glenn, thanks so much for coming on. So what does this mean, this story, do you think?
Well, first of all, anytime anyone asks me about Hunter Biden, I have to say that I don't think we've ever fully processed how extraordinary it was that right before the election, every media outlet, now concerned about Joe Rogan's disinformation, spread the CIA lie that the Hunter Biden emails were Russian disinformation, and that was used to censor the entire story. These are the people so deeply worried about disinformation, and then they never went back and retracted that story, even when a Politico reporter proved those emails were actually real. Now the New York Times reporters, who actually have been quite good about trying to follow this story, are back at it, pursuing the possibility that Hunter Biden in Romania was trading on his father's influence in order to represent corrupt Romanians at the time that his father was vice president. This was always the story, Tucker, was whether Joe Biden was trading on his influence as vice president to generate profit for his son and for his family. And now that there's no election, I guess we're allowed to hear about it.
You have such a good memory, I have to say. I mean, just the news tsunami, overwhelms most of us. We can't remember what the facts were, but you always do. So why do you think, and how do you think, the U.S. government could deny a news organization access to materials like this?
I don't think that we can overstate how desperate and eager agencies in the United States government were to ensure that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. We have so many examples, the one I just gave being one of them, where they just outright lied and spread a complete falsehood to justify the suppression of that reporting that could have really undermined Joe Biden's campaign brand of truth. I don't know if they did that deliberately here, but what clearly seems to be the case is that they withheld information. They told the Times, we'll get this information to you in 2023, namely after the next election in 2022, even though the law requires that they get it in 20 days. So there are a couple reporters, to their credit, at the New York Times serious about pursuing this story, and I feel like they have more space to do that now that there's no election pending.
Yeah, I know. It's that, of course, is always the backdrop, is domestic politics. But I do hope they get it anyway, because you shouldn't suppress the truth. It's not democracy. Glenn Greenwald, thank you, as always, for your reporting. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you, Tucker.
We'll be right back.
In an all-new episode of Tucker Carlson Originals.
George Soros is a billionaire currency trader who has spent decades waging a kind of war. One unlikely country is fighting back. That country is Hungary.
Watch as Tucker goes one-on-one with Prime Minister Viktor Orban and exposes the truth behind the left's globalist ideals.
So your success is a challenge to their worldview.
Tucker Carlson Originals, Hungary versus Soros, streaming now exclusively on Fox Nation. Sign up today.
Before we go tonight, we're going to bring you a quick update from Truckistan, formerly known as Canada, the nation to our north. Justin Trudeau, who runs it, probably the most repulsive neoliberal leader in the world, just tweeted this, quote, "Today in the House, members of Parliament unanimously condemned the anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, anti-black racism, homophobia, and of course transphobia we've seen in display in Ottawa over the past couple of days. Together, let's keep working to make Canada more inclusive." Of course, he's referring to the working class people demanding an end to tyranny. They're now transphobic. Moments later, there was a motion condemning the wearing of blackface was shot down in the Canadian Parliament, meaning the opposition party is totally pathetic. They should be ashamed. Go Truckers. That's it for us tonight. Sean Hannity takes over now.
All right, Tucker, thank you, and welcome to Hannity. All right, tonight for...
Welcome back to Tucker Carlson. Today we had a great conversation with Jason Whitlock. It was so interesting we broke it into two parts. Here's the second part. We know that toxic masculinity is the most dangerous poison. Flesh it out a little bit. Why is it a good thing?
There's irresponsible masculinity.
Right.
There is no toxic masculinity. Masculinity is a good thing. That's how we became number one. That's how America became great. I watched I think it's Amazon Prime, someone put out like a 15-part documentary about America and its greatness, and it's one of the best things, and they clearly did it before everything became so polarizing, because everybody from Trump is in it to Cornel West to, you can come from all these different political spectrums. But if you watch it and really understand, it's an explanation of how masculine, fearless energy is what made America great, and is why we surpassed every other civilization before us. And one of the things I forget what they call them, but the guys that build skyscrapers, I forget what they're called, but I think there was some stat where maybe 1 out of every 5 of them fell to their death.
Oh, yeah.
And
the iron workers, the guy riveting the girders together.
Yeah, there's a name for them, but anyway, 1 out of 5 of them fell to their death. But the world didn't stop. We quit building skyscrapers. People are done. People just well, that's the price of progress. There's some things. The guys that blew holes through mountains to build highways in the West, a lot, that was dangerous. People died. We didn't stop. And that's why I look at the COVID fear. And I'm just like, man, people in the 1900s would look at us like we got to be the biggest cowards in the world.
We are.
We're afraid of everything. These guys were sitting on steel beams, 500 feet in the air to build a building and to, create living space for people. And 1 out of 5 of them fell to their death. Guys were blowing holes, dynamiting through mountains to build dams and to build highways and things like that. And they were dying, and they just kept moving because that was the price of progress. When your society becomes as secular, so detached from God, so scared of death because they don't believe there's anything after death, you're just baiting for a cowardly society where everybody, oh my God, there's a flu virus out here. We all must stay in our homes for 2 years. Let's put masks on and don't look each other in the face. Keep your kids at home, and let's wait till this flu virus is over, and then we'll come back out in 2 or 3 years. We won't recognize the society. We're cowards.
It's so shameful. I couldn't agree with you more. So you used the phrase masculine. I actually wrote it down. Masculine, fearless energy. So that's the life force, is what you're saying.
No question about it. It's what God intended. That's because once you have a sincere belief in God, fear dissipates. Once you remove faith in God, fear becomes stronger. And I think that I want to be careful here because, but I probably am a sexist pig, so I could care less if I'm called that. But the patriarchy is a good thing. It's what God intended. Men are supposed to lead. Men are supposed to be out front, taking risks. We're responsible. I have some ministers on my show every Wednesday, and we talk about it all the time. And again, this if you have a biblical worldview. In the garden, Adam and Eve, when things go haywire, God shows up and calls out, Adam, where are you at? Hey, basically he says, excuse my language, shit ain't right here. Adam, what are you doing? I left you in charge. And God is looking down at us right now, at men. And just, what are you doing? Why are you laying down? Why are you pretending that Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris, Stacey Abrams, that they can save us? They can save this world. This is lunacy. It's out of her role completely. And I'm sorry if that paints me as a sexist pig, but it's what I believe.
Well, that's just an epithet designed to make you be quiet. But I guess I wonder why is that? Why are you not allowed to have that opinion? Why is that so controversial? That was the opinion of every society, like from the beginning of time until about 20 minutes ago. So,
social media, and we've talked about this when I first started coming on your show. Social media decides what's allowable thinking, and social media has decided you can't second guess anything the left is in support of, or you're some kind of sexist pig, you're some kind of transphobic, you're some kind of homophobic, you're racist, you're a sellout. And social media is like the editor-in-chief. Social media is the editor of the New York Times. It's the editor of public discourse in America. And so social media is based in Silicon Valley primarily. That's their employee base. They're headquartered there. And it's promoting the far left agenda through its social media apps, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Google. And so people, they love to talk about the left as the right side of history. And I've been pushing back and telling people, like, you gotta understand, history is written by whoever happens to be in power at that time.
That's for sure.
And there was a higher standard we used to have here in America. And that higher standard used to lead us the proper direction when we were off course. When we were slavery and Jim Crow laws, people used to, I gotta be on the right side of God. And so regardless of whatever I believe, I know how God feels about this. And I'd rather be on the right side of God than whatever emotions, feelings I have. And so take the founding fathers, people of that era, they knew slavery was wrong. And they fixed it, put things in the founding documents that they knew were seeds that were going to blossom and destroy slavery because they wanted to be on the right side of God. And if you go, the battle hymn of the Republic, what they were singing on the battlefield during the Civil War, there are lines, standard verses in there talking about, I know I'm going to die, or I'm going to die so that other men can live free. These were religious people trying to be on the right side of God. And so a lot of times, what people don't understand is that when you have faith, it forces you to do things that you don't want to do because we are filled with sin. I would like to leave this studio right now, go to McDonald's, have a double filet of fish sandwich, French fries, maybe some McNuggets too.
You can get a double filet?
Yes, it's awesome. Trust me, it's awesome.
I've never even gone there, and I would.
It's awesome. But that's gluttony, and God has got a position on gluttony. And so because of my faith, I'm not going to go to McDonald's when I leave here. And even though it's not what I want to do, there's a lot of sinful thoughts we have. I would like to leave here perhaps later this evening and go to a strip club. They have great ones here in Florida. But because I'm a believer, I'm not going to go to a strip club tonight. I used to in the past when I didn't activate my faith properly the way that I should. But I'm just faith causes you, propels you to do the right thing. This society, now that all we're chasing is history rather than being on the right side of God, when you're chasing history and the left has a lock on writing history, they are in control of all of our institutions. They invented this woman, Hannah Nicole Jones, to write a new history, the 1619 Project. So that's just some nut job writing something and they call it history. She's not God. She doesn't have that kind of wisdom that's found in the Bible. And so it's very fluid. 20 years from now, the New York Times may hire someone else to write a whole new history and call it the 1617 Project. Who knows? But that's all very fluid and just whoever's in power. And so that's the mistake we're making. We're being driven by the social media apps because they have a lot of power right now. The instant billionaires that are created in Silicon Valley, have a lot of power right now, and Northern California has a long history of being far left and far revolutionary, and very revolutionary, and they have a Marxist agenda that they're imposing through social media, and they are in control of our public discourse. They're normalizing behaviors and policing thoughts. They're normalizing behaviors that shouldn't be normalized, and they're policing thoughts and telling those of us that have a biblical worldview, everything you've been taught in the Bible is wrong. And social media, here's the retweets and likes to back it up. Didn't you see our algorithm created 20,000 likes and retweets on this? That trumps your Bible, and we're going for it because we're weak and stupid.
So you're describing an asymmetrical battle here between one side that has vision, intensity, commitment, and all the money in every institution, against a remnant of people who are disorganized, fail to see the big picture, and kind of don't have any power. So, and you're on that side.
Yeah. So we actually have the trump card, and it really it's God. It's the gospel. There's power in those words. We won't play them anymore because we're scared and fearful, and evangelicals are the worst people in the world, and we've adopted political identities, we've adopted racial identities, we've adopted identities based off gender and sex, and all we need is a Christ identity. This country was founded under biblical principles. If we do not return to that kind of simple foundation, here's a Constitution in one hand, here's a Bible in another hand. That's all we need. But because we now want, the Republicans are going to protect us, or my gender or my wealth is going to protect, we're losing the country to people that think they're God. That's my biggest complaint about the left. They've anointed and appointed themselves God. And that's what happens in a secular country. And that's Karl Marx's theory, communism, all that. It anoints man as the ultimate authority, the ultimate determiner of life, faith, success, happiness. And I don't want to live in that world. I'm upset just tremendously by, this is a world that doesn't serve Mike Royko, it doesn't serve my dad, it doesn't serve, and my dad wasn't even really a believer, but his values and attitude aligned mostly with belief. But if it's really simple, we got to return to our faith-based, and I don't say that as some holy roller. I think I'm seeing it with Bill Maher, who did a movie mocking religion. I honestly think Bill Maher is starting to understand. I don't think he'll ever jump on board with faith, but I think he's starting to understand, like, faith-based society actually serves non-believers well too.
Yes, it does. So, I guess my question is, have you joined the losing team in this battle?
No. Now, we may lose here in America, but, God will win ultimately. And, maybe here in America we'll lose, but I was someone that thought like the world began and ended with America. And then, do you know the minister Vodi Bakum?
Yeah.
Yeah, Vodi came on my show and made a great point to me that I hadn't considered. He was like, hey, Jason, you got to understand that Christianity, it moves across the globe. And America may not be the hub anymore. It may, because you're seeing Christianity take off in other countries in ways that it's not taking off here in America. And that kind of blew my mind, and it made me go, oh, wow, maybe we're going to be dumb enough to walk away from our faith. But if you look around, look at the Afghan people that were choosing to stand on Christian faith and risk their life. that maybe just the hub, the headquarters of Christianity, just won't be here in America anymore, because we're going to be dumb enough to let it walk away.
When you were a kid, did people you lived around go to church?
Yeah, you know, I'm 54, so
yeah,
people went to church. It was, you know, my mother, again, divorcing from my father, without her faith, she couldn't have made it. She couldn't have done all the things she did, the sacrifice she made without her faith. And then my mother's mother, my grandmother, is the strongest influence on my life. Mama Lovey, Lovey Kid, she, you know, it's hard for me to talk about my grandmother.
Right.
Oh, come on.
But you knew her, your grandmother.
Yeah, great, you know, strongest influence in my life.
Yep.
And very Christian, very just greatest influence on my life. And it's hard for me to talk about.
Yeah. What year is that? When is that?
That's probably me in college, graduating from college in 1990.
Unbelievable.
Where was your grandmother from? Indianapolis?
From Kentucky.
Yeah.
Now you will leave.
Her father
The secret of the spinach
was nearly
shrine, not
lynched
for
by
our
the
sons.
KKK.
Wow.
And they came to get him, took him out. They were going to lynch him. Happened to be a Mason, and he did some sort of pose that signaled he was a Mason. Someone in the KKK was a Mason. They said, we can't kill him. And so they let him go. They moved from Kentucky up to Indianapolis. My grandmother, from that incident, really racist, had a real big problem with white people.
Your grandmother did?
Yes. Her faith in God took all of that away, and she was the embodiment of just love. Loved everybody. Her name was Lovey. Everybody called her Mama Lovey. All of her racism went through her faith in God. All of her prejudice, all that went away. There was nobody that met her that wasn't moved.
Wow. That sounds, she sounds like a wonderful person.
Yeah.
Damn. So now when
talk some shit, huh?
You know, you tell people about your faith, which you often do. You have on our show. In fact, I'm even going to give you a break by playing a moment of you doing that. And this really was kind of the moment where my view of you changed, and you know, you really made me think with this, and I think you made a lot of our viewers think too. So this is from August of 2021, and this is the end of a much longer conversation about something else, and you just sort of stop, and it crystallizes in your mind, and then you just kind of say it on TV. Here's what you said.
I think a lot of what the left supports is satanic. I'm just sorry. It's in direct objection to God, and in direct objection to the Judeo-Christian values that were at the foundation of this country. And those Christian values are why we made so much progress in terms of freedom and humanity and the way we treat everybody. Yes, it was hard, but our Christian values compelled us to sacrifice our lives for the freedoms of other Americans, of slaves. And through the civil rights movement, our Christian values compelled us to take risks and fight for equality and the equality of opportunity for everybody. I see a lot of what's going on here I'm just sorry. I'm a man of faith. I was raised in the church.
I'm not sorry.
This stuff is satanic. That's what's at the foundation of a lot of this stuff.
So, I've never forgotten that moment. I've been thinking about it ever since, and the reason it resonated was because it actually answered the question, like, what is going on here? None of this makes sense. You see people acting against the interests of the country. You see people acting against their own interests. You describe talking to players and saying, you're hurting yourself. And people are persisting in doing this, and it's not rational. It doesn't make sense. No one's benefiting. And this explains it.
If I were to crystallize those thoughts, it's anything that's an attack on truth. And that's what we have going on in America. There's such a hostility towards truth.
You know how long I've been looking for you.
God, Jesus, truth is the way. The truth will set you free. And so that's why I keep calling it satanic, is because somebody's born with male genitalia and feels like a woman. Well, the facts are, the truth is, he's a man. Yes, he has some thoughts about being a woman, but at the end of the day, he's a man. This deal we're doing now where, nope, he feels like a woman, you must say he's a woman, that's an attack on truth. And to give a simpler or a different analogy is, there's the truth that in poor inner city communities, black young boys and men are killing each other at an incredible pace. Social media and corporate media have told us, woo, scariest thing in the inner city is the police. Once or 10 times a year, the police will kill a black man wrongly in the opinion of social media. That's the real threat. And that's just a lie. I lived in the inner city. My dad lived in the inner city his whole life. My dad carried a gun my whole life. He didn't do it because the police may try to kill me. He did it because there were some thugs where the Masterpiece Lounge was and in his neighborhoods that he may have to pull that gun on them. But the media and social media has us talking about the police and these rare cases of the police doing something violent and murderous to black men, and we're pretending like that's the pandemic. And that's just a lie. Yeah. And anytime you start walking people away from the truth, we've been pouring money into how can we get the black community and the police to cooperate and understand each other and get along with each other better, rather than pouring money and resources into how can we get young black boys to get along better so that when they have conflict, they don't turn to guns. Men and boys are going to have conflict. That's the history of the world. There's other ways to handle it other than shooting each other. That's been the history of the world. We need to educate young men, young boys, on how we can take out some of the tension so it doesn't end in gun violence. And then we also need to have the real honest discussion of, hey guys, if your kids at an 80% clip are going to be born into single parent homes, these issues are going to persist in your neighborhood. If there is no return to the nuclear family among black people, this type of violent chaos is going to persist and harm your communities. But when they walk you away from the truth and have you focused on the police rather than your real problems, this is why I call it satanic. It's like they don't want these issues addressed. They don't want improvement. They want the violence and the dysfunction to continue. They don't want to arm people with the truth. Like, actually, if you look at police violence towards anybody, it's actually dissipating. The police actually have been getting better at de-escalating situations and being less violent towards criminals, even resisting ones. But the violence that has afflicted poor inner city black communities, where for the most part there are no nuclear families, that's not dissipating. That's a consistent chronic problem. I think it's one of the leading causes of death of young black men between ages of 16 and 24 or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And we can't even deal with it because we've been lied to, and we won't even address. You got NFL players pooling their resources and getting money from ownership to address police issues rather than family issues. We're not pursuing the truth, and so we're not pursuing solutions. And that's why I call it satanic. We're just baiting, and we're telling people that the nuclear family doesn't matter. And we're telling everybody that, not just black people. We're telling all of American society. As we fall deeper and deeper into chaos, we keep arguing, well, the family's just whatever we want it to be. It's not that important. And look away from those smash and grabs and how unsafe you feel, and the homeless people that's living right in your neighborhood who may walk into your furniture store and kill you. Look away from any of that. That has nothing to do with the breakdown of family in America. You know, if that homeless guy had resources, if he had a stimulus check, he wouldn't kill that woman in the furniture store.
So, my last question. You see things clearly from a high elevation. You've got an amazing overview of what's happening. How do you get that clarity? What's your daily program? Do you reserve time for silence? How do you get the big picture view?
My life has revolved around work probably for too long. And so I'm 54. I don't have kids. I'm not married. So I got more time than most people my age.
Doesn't mean anything. You'll have a soft landing.
mystery.